I'm Paul Werlin, and we are here with John Miller, who is the Republican candidate for Attorney General.
Thanks so much for having me, Paul.
Thank you for participating. Thanks very much. Before we begin, let's review the format of the interview. This will be a live-to-tape interview. That means no edits once we begin. There was no pre-screening of questions, and answers will be limited to 2 minutes each. We will start with a 1-minute opening statement from the candidate, and after the questions, we will conclude with a 1-minute closing statement. Mr. Miller, you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Great. I'll try to make that happen. I'm running for Attorney General because I want to bring a professional approach to that office. It's a very important job, not a political approach. I know the job. I've been practicing law in the state for 36 years in the public construction arena, and I'll pay attention to that job, and I think that's very, very important. Thirdly, I believe I'm the only candidate that can really attack public corruption on Beacon Hill. My opponents are from the party that has participated and has been managing Beacon Hill for many, many years. I will do that independently. I'll do it impartially. And lastly, I think we need an AG that will support innovation, support the new technology, the new startups. We are the state that has innovated in so many ways, and I'll be an AG that's supportive of that.
Thank you. We will now proceed to the questions. Mr. Miller, you have 2 minutes to answer each question. Why are you running for Attorney General, and what prepares you to serve in this capacity?
Well, I won't repeat what I said in the opening. There was a little bit of that, but let me put it this way. When I was 17, my parents dropped me off at MIT. I grew up in a big city and went to big city high school. I was dropped off in Cambridge and went through MIT. I rowed there. I had a very great time on the rowing team as well. But what you learn in civil engineering is very important to problem formulation. One of the most important things to do as Attorney General is to understand the problem. Before you attack a problem, you got to understand it. And I think I have that very solid background in that, 3 degrees from MIT. I went to BU Law School after college. And when you jam law and civil engineering together, what popped out was construction law. So I've been a practicing attorney for 36 years. Clients choose you when you're a private lawyer. They trust you to be a good steward of their money and to use that money wisely in the pursuit of their own interests. So I've learned from practicing law for 36 years that money belongs to the client. The client for the AG is the people of this state, not politicians, not parties, not special interests. You've got to have both eyes focused on representing the people of this state. One of the commitments I've made, and I think one of the reasons I'm running for Attorney General, is I will never be the governor of this state. I have no interest in being the governor. My intent is to resurrect the same approach to this office that Frank Bellotti so successfully applied in the 70s and through the 80s. I intend to be independent, impartial, follow the facts, apply the law, and the politics will take care of itself. And we all rely on that. It's very important. That's the central mission for me in this run.
Right. Thank you. As the Attorney General of Massachusetts, you would serve as the chief lawyer and law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Briefly explain, please, what that entails, and if you think that the current Attorney General has successfully fulfilled her duties, and please give us specific examples to justify your answer.
Sure. Well, I think, I guess let me break that up in a couple pieces. The AG is the chief law enforcement officer of the state, and the AG's client, as I mentioned before, is the people. So one of the tasks of the AG is to also help state agencies fulfill their roles. So one of the things that I think needs to be done again, and I'm going back into the 80s when I was a young lawyer, the AG needs to more actively be involved in giving advice to state agencies. So I think, and that's an area where I think there has not been sufficient attention over the last 8 years. And 2 specific examples. The Health Connector contract, which was let in a couple years ago to replace the old web application for what was euphemistically called Romney Care. That contract, I believe, 40 hours of good lawyering by the Attorney General would have saved $200 million to the taxpayers of the state. Other examples, in the recent probation scandal that resulted in a federal trial, it seems to me that the AG ought to be issuing the old kind of advisory opinions that Frank Bellotti did in the 80s, so that people knew what was beyond the pale. The AG needs to be setting lines that people should not be crossing. And I think 8 years ago that practice stopped. I've already made a commitment, and we're going to reinstitute that again. And this isn't some big, massive bingo game that that everyone in this entire state is playing, but only a few people can ever win. And I just think that the AG can play an active role ahead of time. It's much better to prevent problems than it is to chase them after those problems have arisen. So I think the AG can be much more active. Not swinging your weight around, but letting people know what's acceptable and what isn't.
Thank you. Thank you. On to the next question. Massachusetts oversees an office with multiple bureaus and missions. What executive experience do you have to allow to serve successfully in that capacity?
In the AG's office?
Yes.
Yes, sure. Well, I was a managing partner of Gadsby and Hanna. I'm the only person in this race that ever was a managing partner of a private entity responsible for revenue and expenses, responsible for payroll, responsible to make the whole going concern run. So I think that's my background in the law. But I've been a leader in a number of organizations among lawyers. I was a chairman of an ABA section called the Section of Public Contract Law, which is a group of lawyers that are experts in how should states wisely spend money through competition, and how do you avoid fraud, waste, and abuse in the state contracting system. I was a chairman of that section. It was a national organization. I've been a chairman I was a member of the board of directors of an organization called the American Construction Lawyers College, ACCL. And I was on their board of directors, and so I've had quite a bit of executive experience. And one of the great things about the AG's office is that you do get to lead a talented group of 500 people that want to do things right. And so there will be differences of opinion about how to spend resources, how to proceed in a particular facts of a particular case. And I think I have the experience to make sure, and I have the confidence to get the smartest and the best hardworking people around me. That doesn't in any way scare me at all. That's the environment that the citizens of the state deserve. And out of that robust discussion, I'm very confident that I can lead the AG's office like neither of my opponents can.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. What do you think are the most critical civil rights issues facing the residents of Massachusetts? And how might the Office of Attorney General address these issues?
Well, I think the Constitution is a historic treaty among the citizens of this state, written by John Adams 7 years before the federal Constitution. So I would begin with the Mass Constitution. And the Massachusetts Constitution guarantees all sorts of rights. Our society is built from the individual up. The right to express your own thoughts in speech, the right to associate with others. There's all of the rights that we take for granted. They're right there in the Massachusetts Constitution. So I think one of the primary functions of the AG's office is to protect those individual rights, and that means not only civil rights, as we have come to call civil rights, but also economic rights. So the right to choose a profession, to chase your dreams professionally, to build a business, to start a trade, to do all those things economically that allow people to move around the society. That's also part of constitutional rights. So I think the biggest issue facing the citizens of this state is equal application of that Constitution for everyone. And I think the AG's office should, again, be leading in that area. Much of these issues have been decided by our courts. Our Supreme Judicial Court has interpreted our state constitution in a variety of what are hot social issues, I'm a firm defender of those decisions. I'm not going to spend resources of the taxpayers of this state trying to cause trouble, for any individual, for any group in this state. I think it's in that common support for civil rights and for economic rights that we all do well, and that's really the goal.
Right. Thank you. Please give us 2 examples of how you think the Office of Attorney General could have done more or better during the last 4 years. If elected, what changes would you envision for the Office of Attorney General?
Well, a couple things. I think I mentioned the healthcare connector contract. Let me just give you a quick description of that. Before the new application was up and proven to be working, the old one was taken down and dismembered. Now, just think about that. If the Bank of America did that, or one of your local banks, or Amazon or Google took down their ordering system before they knew they had the next ordering system up and running, and then the second ordering system didn't work, it'd be chaos. And that's what we've had. So I think one of the things I will bring to the office is a very deep understanding of how public contracting should work, how tax dollars should be spent in a competitive way, and how contracts should be written. I've read those contracts. The state was not properly protected when that web application was built, and that's an example of where someone should have been paying attention. I'll give you another example, and this is completely different area, completely different, but in the medical marijuana licensing process. I've looked at the statute, it was passed by referendum, and I've looked at the regulations that came out. Now, I think the AG has an obligation in these kind of situations to give advice beforehand, so that the state agency acts with proper legal advice. Now, in the medical marijuana licensing clinics, they're going to be able to sell medical marijuana upon prescription. In the award of those licenses, cost to the user is not an evaluation factor. And it seems to me that, I think 5-10 hours of lawyering up front would put some competitive price pressure on those applicants for licenses. And it's just, I just think that it's very different, those 2 examples, but you get the point.
Right.
Just a little bit of attention.
Right, thank you. What specific proposals would you seek to implement to help the Commonwealth and its residents in the areas of consumer protection?
Well, I think there's 2 areas to me that are most critical, and this is on identity theft and internet fraud. Mm-hmm. And I think this, we're in the information age. I think these scam artists and fraudsters are way ahead of law enforcement in some of these areas. Now, I think this is an example of an area that I believe my background is kind of unique. I taught at MIT for 10 years, a PhD from MIT. That big systems don't scare me. I'm used to that. We need to, and I think the AG is the only entity in this state that can lead the kind of technological catch-up that we need to do, so that from the AG's office right down to the district attorneys and the sheriffs, we stand up better systems to catch people that are involved in identity theft and internet fraud. So, for example, I think there's ways to find and lock people who are committing identity theft, and the AG should be leading that effort to try to coordinate that, and I think we can do a lot better. Big data, that's a consulting area of expertise. We need to bring that knowledge and that expertise into law enforcement, and I think over the last 8 years, we've kind of been treading water and falling behind organizationally, in other words, at the top. And I think the district attorneys can't do this alone on a county-by-county basis. It has to be led by the AG's office. So one of the things I'm going to propose is that we bring all of law enforcement together with community leaders, a defense bar. We're going to stand up a crime summit early in my administration to look at how we deal with crime, but one of the major areas of that is identity theft and internet fraud.
Okay, thank you. What role does the Attorney General's office play in helping the state economy? creating jobs and attracting new business, and keeping existing businesses from leaving the state?
Well, I think, there's some things the AG cannot do. I mean, the AG does not have a vote in the legislature and does not have the governor's pen to sign legislation into law. So I'm going to put that aside. But let's look at how the AG can help in the area of business. When I was teaching at MIT, I ran a startup, a software startup briefly, and ended up selling that to another entity. And it's still going, it's still alive, it's been sold a second time now. But I understand how hard it is to stand up a new company, to raise capital, to sell your ideas, to move it forward in the technology area. But that's true just as well in the electrical contracting field or in plumbing field, or I'm familiar with construction firms. It's so hard. People work so hard to make a business successful. And the AG's office, I think, and it gets back to my point about advisory opinions, I think 8 years ago the decision was made not to be so public about what the AG's positions are on regulatory matters. And I think that's a disservice to people who are trying to start new businesses, trying to grow their own business. And it sends the wrong signal to people already here that maybe Massachusetts is not the right place to be. So I think the AG's office, we should be streamlining how the AG manages, and for example, in the nonprofits areas. I think we should be streamlining that. But I think the AG should be putting out its position so people understand, like in the area of wage enforcement. I mean, the legislature has spoken. I think we should systematically go after people who are violating the wage laws. But let's do it in a systematic way, not anecdotally. Let's not make it, case by case, person by person. Let's enforce those laws with better technology. Let's really get after it and make sure that people are operating well, competing fairly, and everyone can win.
Right. Thank you. Please give us one example of an issue that you and your opponents agree on, and 2 examples of issues in which you differ, and why your position represents the best interests of the Commonwealth.
Well, let's see. What we agree on. I think we agree on, as I mentioned, wage and labor enforcement. I think, and I'll give you 2 quick examples. Wage and labor, the legislature's spoken on that. We need to enforce the wage and labor laws properly, fairly, and uniformly across the state. And I fully support that. I've always been a supporter of that, because businesses need to compete on a level playing field. And it's very disheartening and very discouraging if you're obeying the law and your competitors are not. So I think I would expect, I don't know, but I would expect my opponents would agree on that. See, where we disagree. I would think that we might disagree about how best to attack corruption on Beacon Hill. To me, if 6 or 7 people get together and they divert a contract to a favored construction company or a favored software company or a favored service supplier, that's larceny to me. That's theft. It's one of the big 10. You're not supposed to steal. I think contracts are similar in nature to jobs. I think if you're a hard-working state employee, doing the right thing, trying to get a promotion, working hard at your job, and those promotions don't come your way because there's a system that's rigged that prevents you from a promotion, I think that kind of a diversion is also theft. And it should be treated, I don't mean harshly, but I think clear warning signs should be set out through advisory opinions. If you do these kinds of things, you're going to run afoul of the Attorney General. I think another area we might disagree is, recently there was a little bit of a furor about an audit that was completed by the state auditor, and
Sorry,
no
time's up.
problem.
Next question is, what strategies would you use for working with members of other parties and with others of opposing views? What experience do you have implementing these strategies?
Sure. Well, what are the strategies? Where every single person in the state is a citizen. All citizens have the same rights, and people who are here about to be citizens with green cards or however, they're also citizens. They have certain rights. I said that poorly, but we all have the same rights. And what I mean by that is, I don't think the AG should be swinging a lot of weight around, in a kind of a childish way. So it's my nature from 36 years of private practice. You always have to work with people, and you always have. We all are different, and we have different opinions, and we come to different conclusions about issues that have different levels of importance to us. So I'm used to that. I've done that for 36 years. I mentioned my service as chairman of an ABA section of public contract law, 3,500 members from all around the country. We worked on a model procurement code. We did that in a collaborative way. I led that with a very senior lawyer from Arizona. And that's you work collaboratively. I taught at MIT for 10 years. Collaborating with other faculty, with students. I had research funding from NSF. That's how you work. So collaboration is natural to me. And I don't think that the citizens of this state want anything other than a professional approach to the Attorney General's office. It's not a political job. And if I had my druthers, it would be a nonpartisan election. So I just think that it's very simple. It's a very simple approach, and I mean it. That job requires collaboration among your top bureau chiefs, among law enforcement, the DAs, the sheriffs, among community leaders, with contractors. You cannot succeed alone. Right.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, you now have 1 minute for a closing statement.
Wow, that went by fast. Well, thank you, Paul. Just to sum up, I'm kind of repeating what we've discussed already, but I'm running for Attorney General because I think the citizens of this state are the client for the Attorney General. The people are the client. And I believe, from practicing law for 36 years, I will remember that. As I've said, I have no interest in being governor. I will keep both eyes on the people's interest in representing them as their top law enforcement official and the chief law enforcement officer of this state. It sounds unique, but from a lawyer's perspective, that's how it should be. All of us expect a level playing field. We expect to live our lives, to make our choices, to pursue our own dreams, to work hard, to go to the Celtics when we want to go to the Red Sox when we want to. But it's very important that level playing field be here, right. And that's the job of the AG.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We want to thank Mr. Miller for participating in our conversation. Please make your voice count by voting at the state primary on September 9th. For Arlington Public News, this is Paul Werlin. Thank you for joining us.